What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I taught my 6th grade students about democratic processes, and we ran a simulation. Without fail, every one of my classes tried to impeach me. Well, I feel a lot less original now, Mayo. I'm a college student and last year we had a class about Congress in which part of the class was simulation based. I got the idea to impeach our professor and it soon became a bipartisan effort. Professor was pretty cool about it. When we submitted the articles, one of which included accusing him of murdering Jeffrey Epstein, he jokingly banged his fists on the table and called us all traitors. After the impeachment vote passed, the speaker told him the Senate will decide your fate, and he was in the loop enough to know that the acceptable response was I am the Senate. Edit. We did end up successfully removing him from office. Before these shenanigans started, I asked him casually who the VP was, in case the Senate ends up in a tie vote. As a result, we already knew who his successor would be, in this case the tar. We had an our lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse just spits out, oh these other warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them. He stops, walks over, and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him. We knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Our lady doesn't seem to care about human relations. She would order lunches at work for beating goals only for office people. Production and warehouse teams would come in and be told, oh none of this is for you. But we make and ship the products. But that doesn't matter, I guess. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I check their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request, see who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. So we agree. Great. I've managed service industry for years, and the number of people who make that threat having never spent a penny is baffling, especially this year. I swear it's once a week right now that after I tell somebody to leave and not return, they've threatened not to return. I've had to have police remove people, and they'll scream about how they'll never return on their way out. Are the police dragging you out not enough of a sign that that's exactly what I want? What about the criminal trespassing notice you got? I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12+ hour days 6 days a week, and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as hell from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking shit. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is ducked up, and the department manager, my name, was a total moron, and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know shit about my industry, and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him, and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to witch my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only CEO could fire him. I said, "And my name, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. As my previous foreman would say, I can fix dumb, but I can't fix stupid. A co-worker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas, and he was able to upgrade to a first class seat. We had this switch sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant McMansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got that seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally he tells her she has to go back to her seat or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first class cabin. And to think that is someone's boss rip. In my experience, so far anyway, all the worst people hold positions of power. I have a good manager now, but it does feel like a lot of managers rise to their level of incompetence. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet, and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there, and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing, putting a dish on his house. I'll let him know that I pay the mortgage now, and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Edit. I didn't expect to see all this when I checked Reddit again. I'll try to answer questions and things below. I like the jokes. Probably a coping mechanism lol. Edit 2. I see a lot of people talking about the deed and wanted to say something about that. I'm not sure which of my parents' names were on the deed, but what I did know is that if I didn't pay it, it was going to foreclosure. We already had warnings, and it wasn't the first time that had happened. I was young when this all happened, and probably didn't even know what a deed or title was at that time. If I stopped paying, we no longer had a house. A constant argument from parents to their kids is that they pay for the roof over your head, so you'll do what they tell you. They rarely say I own the deed, you do what I tell you. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants, which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him, and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the duck he was doing here. He started in on me again, and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the all hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. When an unhappy client threatens to go hire a better lawyer, they don't seem to get that this isn't a threat when they aren't paying me. In my professional experience, it is exceedingly rare to be fired by a client you don't want to fire you. I've worked at a law firm for only a few months, but Yeah. Every time a client has fired us like 3 times, everyone at the office is like, oh thank God. In my first apartment, my parents came to visit and I said duck when I hit my head on the open door of the freezer while standing up from grabbing something from the fridge. My mother said you can't talk like that in my house and stopped mid-sentence. I worked at a Walmart as a cashier and the assistant manager there was a dick. He would insult everybody working there and forced us sometimes to do work above our pay grade. 6 months later me and him got transferred to another Walmart that was just built and they needed to pick a manager and assistant manager. Some random got manager, but I got assistant manager. I guess all the complaints on the assistant manager basically gave him a demotion, so one day he was ordering the other cashiers around, then I pulled him to the side and told him that if he kept pulling the same shit around he would be out of here. I haven't heard anything from him since. That surely must have been one of those moments where you're like, I'm so going to enjoy this. You serious? Just reading that comment gave me class 5 kg level boner. I worked at a movie theater and some customers were adamant that a staff member had stolen their wallet after they dropped it. Turns out that these people just couldn't see and found the wallet once they actually looked for it. They got irate with literally everyone, from the mall security to the managers to the staff. Mall security finally said get the duck out, and the customers went, you can't say that. This isn't your theater, we are customers. Mall security guy promptly said this is my mall, and I can do whatever the duck I want. I love that security guard, and I hope he gets nothing but the best in life, as he deserves. Absolute king shit. New CEO came to our department on the first day of his work. He didn't have a pass card yet and a lower level employee told him that he can't enter without pass card. CEO got upset and ordered a worker to let him in, but the worker insisted, show me the pass card or you're not entering. Few days later this worker got a bonus. When I was in high school I worked at Popular Warehouse Club selling computers on the weekends. I was hired by the store manager via referral of a friend. I loved computers, and they thought I'd make a good salesman. So my job was to stay in the computer department and sell computers, nothing else. Well, one of the shift managers didn't like that and insisted that I needed to go fold clothes for a while, as in half my damn shift. I told him that the store manager had instructed me never to leave the technology department, but he insisted. This went on for several weeks. The store manager showed up one weekend when both the power trip-in shift manager and I were working. The store manager walks up with the shift manager clothes behind. Store manager slaps a stack of green bar paper down onto a shelf and points to some highlighted numbers. He looks at the shift manager and says, do you see this? This is our average technology sales numbers for the weeks you are on shift. See this number over here? This is our average technology sales numbers for weeks you are not. At this point, it would be more cost effective for me to simply fire you. What do you think of that solution? The guy stammers and stutters like a toddler caught bullying another kid on the playground. Fortunately, the dude wasn't fired, but the store manager made it clear that when I was on shift, I was not to leave the technology department unless I was on break or there was a fire in the store. That shift manager never said another word to me. The best jobs are when management has your back. Knowing this and the value of what you bring to the table is the best thing that manager could have ever done. I hope you kept this as a reference for future jobs. When I was still a child I saw how abusive my grandparents were to my parents when they used to stay in their house during their early years of marriage. When they were broke, they are forced to accept the abuse and swallow their pride knowing that they are still indebted to them and had nowhere to go. Once they have enough money to leave my grandparents they moved to a small rented house. My grandparents came for an unannounced visit and berate my dad for living in such a shanty house and how ungrateful he was for leaving their home. My dad was silent until they start blaming my mother for being a wife that brought bad luck to my dad and how she poisons him into moving to a new home. My dad weren't having any of their bile anymore and kicked them out. They stopped talking until my grandfather was dying of leukemia. My mom was the one who persuaded my dad to see him before he passed. Props to your parents. It sounds like they really had each other's best interest at heart. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to my channel for more curated daily Reddit stories.